is your favorite foxy writer, Brandy Ackerley, taking you behind the pen with me for things that are book-related. Usually. I say usually because today, we're actually talking about books. During my debut stream, I had more than a few people who, when they found out that I was an author and a reader, that wanted book recommendations. Now, while I was asked for all genres, as well as questions about what sort of books I read, I didn't have anything prepared to answer with an actual list at the time. So I pushed it back so I could do a whole video on it. This video! Technically, the next two videos. Since I decided to separate them into, like, the must-read fantasy authors for me, and books in the series that I really enjoyed immensely, but aren't must-reads. This video is going to be the one for the authors that I feel you have to read. These are the ones. Oh, and back in my debut stream, I was also asked what I was currently reading. So, as an added bonus, I'm going to start each future stream with a quick list of what books I'm currently reading, and a quick book review of any books that I finished that week, as well as answering any questions you guys may actually have about those books. Since I usually read somewhere between 50 to 70 books a year, I can also take some recommendations from you. So if you have a favorite book that you want me to read, you can let me know in the stream as well, or here in the comments, anything. I can't promise I'll read every suggestion, but yeah, I'll try to get to most of them, okay? Oh, and before I forget, if you like what I do here and you want to see more, then hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. If you're really enjoying it and want to let me know, then share the video or leave me a comment. Like, I get absolutely giddy whenever I get comments on my videos. Okay, so back to this week's topic, book recommendations. Specifically, epic fantasy type recommendations. Since that was essentially my favorite genre until I discovered urban fantasy, I can definitely talk knowledgeably about this one. So, what sort of epic fantasy do I enjoy? Well, I absolutely adore books that are focused on rounded, intelligent characters and the issues around them. I love reading about relationships, and in particular, slow burn romances or friendships will get a great review from me every time. I also love the typical medieval fantasy, based in a European-type location, but even more so. I love the stories that escape that and travel beyond the usual haunts. I'm thoroughly tired of reading about the British Highlands, renamed, the Emerald Isles, renamed, and the French courts, renamed. In particular, I love the aesthetic of Asia, specifically Chinese or Japanese. Not that those are better than any other part of Asia, but I've done more research on those, so I can see them more clearly. I also want magic. Give me monstrous creatures, adorable fox-like pets, and motherfucking dragons. But I want the magic to serve a purpose and to have rules, or I want the magic to remain completely unexplored and not have it be the be-all, end-all to the plot. Plot is actually the lowest on my list of what I desperately require in a book, but that said, I still expect it to be something entertaining, something that makes sense, and something that doesn't expect the characters to be stupid to solve it. I know, I'm asking for a lot. But these writers give me everything in that list, and usually more. Let's start with my favorite childhood author, the amazing Anne McCaffrey. Anne McCaffrey is very well known, but for those of you who still haven't heard of her, she writes a very niche genre that I have always called science fantasy. Basically, all of her stories have science in them. The science can be squishy, or it can be hard. I mean, the woman has actually researched Oort clouds and asked actual scientists about how her thread creatures would work in the Burn series. At the same time, Motherfucking dragons, y'all! It was one of the few series that I and my father both loved reading. Him because it was a perfectly decent light science fiction series, and me because it was a fantasy with dragons. People are still arguing about which she is, science fiction or fantasy, if you search for these arguments, and she's been dead for like 9 or 10 years now. If you haven't read her Pern series, it's about Earth colonists who travel to the planet Pern, knowing it to be a one-way trip. When they get there, they are harried by a type of creature that lives in the Oort cloud. Whenever the planet gets close enough for the hungry thread organisms there to threaten the world, they essentially eat everything organic, and only fire and water can kill them. The humans genetically engineer a small telepathic dragon-like creature from the planet into creatures large enough to ride to save the people from incursions. If that's too much dragon for your science-loving sensibilities, I can suggest any one of her other series, including Kids, Cats, and Telepaths, and Cat People in Space. But all of her books are awesome. I love everything I've ever read of hers. The writing is a bit old-fashioned, but so good. She was one of the first feminist writers, always including strong heroines in her books, no matter how much she was told that some such things wouldn't sell. And her books are just amazing. They're amazing. I love them. One of my favorite authors. Next, we'll move a bit further ahead. Most people know of Jacqueline Carey, if only because of her best-selling Federace trilogy, which is actually the one that I suggest you guys start with. But all of her books rock too. The first one in the series is Crucial Start. Her writing is poetic and magical and spicy. Fair warning on this one, though the title character is blessed by the god of pain and finds pleasure in such. There will be scenes that you may find uncomfortable if this, isn't a fetish of yours. However, her books are also filled with characters that seem to come off the page and glorious poetic writing, and, a setting reminiscent of medieval France, an inherent magic that, while there and obvious, is also usually godly and out of people's hands directly. And these are not, despite being novels in which sex happens, not solely about the sex. The main character is almost always dealing with political intrigues, which is another favorite story of mine. If I have any problems with her writing, it's that I tend to get the feeling that she sometimes writes herself into a corner and then glosses over how her characters get out of it. But regardless of that, I still love the series. I literally squealed out loud when she asked her fans if the idea of rewriting the first book from Jocelyn's perspective would be something of interest. She clearly wasn't expecting all of her fans frothing at the mouth for the idea, though, because she very quickly let us know that she hadn't even started writing it yet. It was still just in the early working stages. Still, it's one that I suggest, especially if you don't mind some sex and violence in your poetry. Next is one of my all-time favorite authors, Anne Bishop. She writes dark fantasy pretty much exclusively, but she is the best at it. I love her novels. Some of her earlier novels are a bit rough, but oh my god, it's all good. It's all good. My favorite series of hers, and the one that definitely is on that must-read list for fantasy, regular fantasy, is her Dark Jewels series. A brilliant one about dangerous, alluring men and the rebirth of Witch, essentially a mortal goddess. But her Ephemera series is also a great one, where perception is everything, and power comes from knowing how to harness that. Fair warnings for her as well, though. Her books tend to deal with rape a lot, as well as the mental issues that can fall from that. It's a common theme in her series, and it can be sometimes really hard to read, but it's never glorified, and I just think that it's a good thing to note when suggesting it to new readers. This book in particular contains the first 3 books of that Dark Jewels series. I still have the original copy of this. Oh, I've had to duct tape it together at this point because I've read it so often. Oh, I specifically repurchased these titles electronically just so I wouldn't damage the original book when I read them anymore. Next on my list is J. Kristoff, an amazing author who I first picked up simply based on these absolutely gorgeous covers. And while I haven't read his latest books yet, I can say that the Lotus Ward series is one of my favorite series. Like, it is up there. I don't know if I can say it's not my favorite series. It's taking place in a steampunk, not Japan. And the main character's father is tasked with finding and capturing a griffin for the Emperor, a creature known to be extinct. Despite that, they find one, and it nearly takes out the airship that they're on while trying to capture it. The main character and the creature fall from the skies and end up having to work together to get out of the Oni-infested lands back to safety. On their way, they find rebels fighting against the Emperor. This series' themes of environmentalism and heroism at all costs, combined with its Japanese steampunk aesthetic, make it one to put on your list. What I really like about his novels is that this is not an author to pull his punches. If you're expecting a happy ever after, you're not going to find that here. The characters go to hell, and that changes them. I mean, if that's your thing, and it totally is mine, then I wholeheartedly suggest this. Now, if you insist that your characters be 100% happy at the end of the book, it might not be for you. Even then, I still suggest reading it. It's just that good. Next on the list, Philipa Valentine. She started getting some real fame for her steampunk series that she co-authors with T. Morris. But she first got on the map because of her absolutely amazing fantasy novels. She started off with Chasing the Bard, a romance between Scythe and the goddess of battle, and William Shakespeare, with the lives of all of the Fae hanging in the balance. Oh, it was an amazing book. I loved it. But her Geist series is even better. In a world torn apart by magic and the dead, only the Order of the Deacons can save their people from possession. One of the most powerful of their order must team up with a dispatched Lord of the Realm under a terrible curse and possession of his own to stop the infiltration of the dead into their world. Oh, so good. So good. I 100% suggest that you read the Geist series if you haven't already. Geist is, Order of the Deacon series. The first book is called Geist, as you can see here. The next on my list is the great man himself, Brandon Sanderson. For many of us, Sanderson has become the voice of a generation of fantasy lovers. His books have intelligent plots and characters. His writing gives the characters life that makes them leap off the page and take flights in our mind. If you've been holding off, don't walk, run to pick up one of his books. In particular, I suggest his Mistborn series if you're looking for a series. They are one of the best fantasies I've ever read in my life. You may also absolutely adore his Stormlight Archive series. I heartily suggest that one as well. He's only 4 books into it, but with books so long that the binding machines can't bind them, even on the smallest font choice that they can do, I guarantee that while the read is worth it, you've got a lot to look forward to. You won't catch up immediately. They're long books. That said, the one book that I suggest you read above all others from him, if you don't read anything else, is one of his few novelettes. Titled The Emperor's Soul. This is the story of a thief with a very unique skill, tasked with rewriting the Emperor's soul. And in my opinion, is the best thing he's ever written. I have a signed copy of this, and it's one of my most valued novels. So yeah, pick that one up before anything else on this list, but those 2 other series are gold, and everything else he does is good. Let's move on now to a friend of mine, author Laura Van Andronk Bao. Laura writes fantasy that will make you hunger for more. Her Shard of Elan series about two worlds at war is absolutely amazing, and I have been on the edge of my seat desperately waiting for each new installment. Even before that, though, her Kitsune Suki series, the first book about an onmyoji tasked with protecting a warlord's new bride from Kitsune, was one of my favorites. And then she followed it up with Kitsune Mochi, a story about Kitsune that was just awesome. Of course, I'm biased. I fully admit I am biased here. I first met her when I jabbed my finger excitedly on her book upon seeing it at one of my writers' conferences, and had to admit when she asked where I knew them from, that I knew them because I'd had both books on my to-read list for months. While I hadn't planned on buying any books that day, I ended up picking up both of those because I absolutely refused to even chance them selling out before I was able to make it back to buy them. Despite that, I would still suggest that you pick up her Shard of Elan series first. I'm unfairly biased towards her Kitsune books, based on my love of everything Fox. Whereas I can say without hesitation that the Shard of Elan series is the best that she's written so far, and the characters will leave you desperately needing more of the story. The first 3 books of the Shard of Elan series are out now, with the fourth and last installment being expected later this year, I believe? I think it's later this year. The last series on this list is actually a light novel series from Japan, from Miyu Haskara. Now, the story of Spice and Wolf, unashamedly my favorite anime of all time, is also one of my favorite book series of all time. While the writing is just a little bit wooden due to the nature of translation more than any such woodenness in the author's writing, the characters are amazing. It's the story of a young traveling merchant who is simply working, daydreaming about his dream to one day open a store and settle down somewhere. Into his boring everyday life comes a wolf, believed to be the pagan god of the harvest of a small town he goes through every year. This wolf comes in the form of a beauty of a young woman, human aside from her wolf ears and tail. She begs the traveler to see her to her home in the far north. He agrees, and what follows certainly has a lot of slow burn romance, but surprisingly, it is way more focused on how the two always manage to come out ahead as merchants, and how they use a very basic marketing degree essentially to always come out ahead. This sounds boring, but it's amazing just due to the incredible characters of Holo and Lawrence. Their interactions. The books will carry you through all 18 volumes without even realizing how many you've read. They are wonderful. This series also has the other book that I am most proud of in my collection. A leather-bound book with all of the original art and the first 17 novels included in it. It's my dream one day to get it signed as well. Okay, and with that, we're done. We have reached the end of my must-read fantasy authors list. Once again, I love all of these authors. They are masters of their craft. My favorite series of all time are here. As I have mentioned, I have another episode planned with special mentions to single books that I consider must-reads rather than authors that are must-reads, and other series that I just heartily enjoy even if they aren't the best books ever. And I still think that you'll really enjoy them. That episode will be coming out next week in my next Behind the Pen episode. Since I pre-recorded this video as of its release, I am already at and presenting at When Words Collide. And I absolutely can't wait to do a show on how great all of the panels and presentations were, as well as my own panels and presentation I was on. Especially that first solo presentation. I so hope it goes well. I hope it goes well. I I can say that I've never had a bad year at WWC, and I don't think I'm going to be, I don't think I'm going to have a bad one this year either. Every year I learn so much from the other authors there. Yeah, so excited, so excited. I absolutely cannot wait. So as always, I hope you enjoyed the episode, and I would love to hear who your must-read authors are. Tell me who you think I missed, and which authors you think I got right, and I will see you next Wednesday. All right?